And as a reminder to those of you viewing on CalSpan, if you'd like to give public comment at any point, it's easiest if you join via the Zoom link, but you can also call in, and that's on the agenda as well. Okay, so welcome to the regular business meeting of the California Truth and Healing Council. It's about 1:15. We'll do a roll call, and then we will pause recording to do a traditional opening. From the Central Region, Councilmember Khan is not present. Councilmember Kessler-Mata.
Present.
Councilmember Maccaro.
Present. And on mute, evidently.
Councilmember Manzano is not present. Councilmember Burris.
Present.
Councilmember Perrone is not present, I don't think. Councilmember Sisk.
I'm here.
Councilmember Roberts, I didn't see on, but okay, it's not present. Councilmember Bajorquez.
Present.
Councilmember Harper.
Present.
Councilmember Myers. Don't think I saw him on. Not present. Councilmember Giovanetti.
Here.
Great. And Southern Region, Councilmember Elliot Santos.
Present.
Councilmember Turner is not present. And Councilmember Phelps.
Present.
So we do have a quorum to begin business and to take action. As a quick update on the Southern Region, we do have a nominee that we're putting forward to the governor for the non-federally recognized seat. So we should have that announced by the next meeting. And if we could stop recording for the traditional blessing, we'll have the traditional opening by Councilmember Elliott. Thank you, Councilmember. So the next piece on the agenda is the bylaws and process. And for those of you following along, the draft bylaws are available at cthc.ca.gov. Oh, sorry, it's been a long week. tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/meetings. And that's where you can find all of the items that will be discussed today. So for the council's background, these draft bylaws were presented last meeting as a potential format for you to conduct business. They haven't been substantially amended except for the amendments that we did on the last live stream. The only amendments that are in this new document are just minor formatting errors. So those have been updated. But we'll leave it to the council for discussion and whether you'd like to make any further amendments or whether you'd like to adopt or whether you'd like to table these to another time to think a bit more about it. And then you can also talk about any other process that you'd like to have in your business.
I had a suggested amendment.
Okie doke.
I had a suggested amendment. I don't know if they can hear me.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. I would like to add a definition for listening session, just because it would then help to distinguish it from a regular or non-regular meeting, which the council members are required to attend.
Okay.
And I had a question about Article 1, Sections B and C. those seem to be duplicative, at least on the version I have. Is that correct? Duplicative, but slightly different.
Yeah, they're duplicative but slightly different because we were trying to differentiate between this council that governs it and whether and the council at large that might have non-voting members. So for the definitions, and if that doesn't make sense, we can also make some amendments there if it needs to be clearer. But
I see. Okay.
yeah, so let's see. See, in the definitions, the council is defined as the governing council and any non-voting representatives duly appointed or elected by the governing council. And then the governing council is the body of tribal leaders and representatives duly appointed by the tribal advisor pursuant to the executive order. And the charter is voting and alternate voting members. So you would be the governing council. And then if you did choose to expand it,
I see.
apply to that. But at this point, it's not really applicable to anybody, really.
Okay, and then I note that the governing council members must attend all regular and non-regular members, while the other council members must attend only the regular meetings.
Yeah, and the difference for that is in case the governing council wanted to do anything. So the non-regular meetings are basically if you want to take action and you need to do it in kind of a quick way. And so in the event that you did bring in other members that were non-voting, that you wouldn't necessarily need them for those.
Okay. And then my last item for this article was D, tribal advisor, item 3. The end of that sentence, I wonder if we could add, well, the sentence to read, the tribal advisor shall arrange all meetings of the council in coordination with staff and the governing council.
Sure thing.
Okay, I know it's your intent. Thanks.
Any other thoughts, Councilmember
Christine-
Armata?
Oh yeah, do you think this is the appropriate place for us to kind of think about the issue that was raised in the listening sessions about the types of actions that the council can take outside of making recommendations? So just as a kind of point of departure, we were asked potentially by a member in the listening session, by a community member, as to whether or not we would be willing, as a council, be willing to support their petition in a particular context, right? I think what it raised to me, and I think Christina, at that time you indicated that potentially, yes, the council could take such action to support a petition of that sort, but that we would need to potentially check it again, cross-check it against the bylaws and the charter. And so I'm wondering if we need that articulated. I mean, to me, it's like, I have no issues with the particular substantive issue that the person was raising. It's more about the process. Like, are we allowed to take actions like that? Should we be in the business of potentially supporting or not supporting or coming out in favor of ongoing issues, emergent issues that community members raise in these contexts, or is that beyond the scope of our powers and duties, right?
I would say, just as some thoughts to think about, are that I don't know that those authorities would be outside necessarily something that you might want to do. I might suggest, though, that it might be premature given the scoping and the mission kind of creation that you're still in. And so I think once that's a bit more solidified, it might make more sense if and when you do choose to engage. So if this council is oriented on, you know, historical depredations and things that are linked to specific scoping, like some of the things that were in the listening sessions, identity, you know, creation of tribes in general, and I'm just throwing things out there, but that as you form that kind of mission and that kind of scope, it might make more sense how you vet those kind of requests if you were to act on them. But I'll leave it to the group to think about. because I think at this point in time, you have the potential to get a lot of that type of thing without having first kind of figured out how you're going to approach the work and what your lane is necessarily.
I had one more question, if I may. Article 3, item D(I). It talks about counseling or rescheduling a meeting with a minimum of 3 days notice. And I can certainly see you might need to counsel 3 days or less, but I'm questioning whether rescheduling with 3 days notice is really helpful or appropriate. And maybe I'm reading this wrong, but what I'm trying to avoid is rescheduling a meeting on a Friday morning for a meeting that would be held on Monday afternoon. I think 3 calendar days notice is a little too short.
Yeah, and so I would say for that, we're still subject to the Bagley-Keene-ish requirements that we're under. So we would have to have at least 10 days in advance for the agenda and the notification. So the 3 days notice would be that we are rescheduling, but we'd have to have at least 10 days notice for the actual date.
Okay.
So I can clarify that further if that needs clarification.
I appreciate the explanation, and I leave it to you to clarify. But I think it would be helpful. If that's the intent, there's no problem. It shouldn't be a problem in putting it in writing.
Sure.
Thank you. And that's all I had.
And again, council members, you don't need to ask for permission to speak, just like with the listening sessions. As long as you're engaging respectfully, I think we're okay. If we start having issues, we might need to have some rules put in place, but. Any further thoughts, discussion on either the bylaws, which sound like we need to do a little bit more of amendment on before it can be finalized for your review. And then the point that Council Member Kessler-Mata brought up about thinking about the kinds of powers that this council might want to be able to exercise.
Christina. So I agree. I think we should wait one more meeting, and maybe at our next meeting, we can move then to adopt our bylaws with whatever amendments have been proffered. Waited 2 years to use that word. I see it in writing here and there. Anyhow, the other thing is that on Kusla's question, I've been mulling it over. I can think of a couple of instances where, like over the last 18 months, where I think I don't know if it would have been. Well, it would have been nice to have a support letter. You know what? I think Siri is talking at the same time. That's what's going on. I thought somebody was cutting in. It's a shame this is being recorded right now. And so, and then further back in time, for instance, we were fighting a mining company that was going to destroy a sacred site half mile off Pechanga, off our reservation. And, it would have been useful, I think, at that time to have that. But I can think of a whole bunch of other issues where, or instances where it would get really complicated to have support letters under consideration by our council as a distraction from our main mission. I don't know, so I don't really have it's a gray area for me right now. But I think in terms of process a lot and what we have time for, and I think our core mission, our reason for existence is, it's a pretty heavy duty one. And I think we need to focus as much time on that. I can see, because I've seen other committees and boards, they can get bogged down on, the words inside a paragraph. Should we flip the opening and the closing? And you start micromanaging the editing of a letter. And the intent is good. You want to support, a sacred site or a movement or something. And so I think if an issue arises and it's core to our existence, then or parallel like that, extremely congruent, perhaps we should consider it. But um, to support other things that are that are native and worthy of support might not squarely fall in our arena, given the amount of time that we have to address the things that we need to address. So those are my initial thoughts right now. I would also caution that we should probably think about it a little more, but I don't have, Kusla, I don't have an immediate answer on that. So other than what I just said. So I'm concerned that we get in the support letter writing business, and we don't want to do that. I don't think we do.
Yeah, my reservations are similar. I think there are good tools that we could use if at some point we want to employ, some of that, doing that process. And I do think, we may need like California Indian Legal Services has the Indian versus Indian policy, where they don't take up, kind of issues that are going to implicate where two tribes are fighting, amongst each other or what have you. Like we could have that. We could have, I mean, there's lots of different ways, right, that we could move it. But I think you're right. First, we need to figure out what we're doing, and then make sure that those petitions are relevant to that mission. So, yeah.
Years ago, I got a phone call from, I won't say what tribe, but we had a website at Humboldt State University for pretty much everything Native American studies, thanks to one of our students who maintained it. But the individual who contacted me from the Bay Area said that these people on your website that are petitioning, they are imposters, and they wanted us to take that information that they were petitioning for federal acknowledgement off of our website. So it doesn't take much, to be kind of drug into some things that there's no way to sort them out, right? So those are good points that were just brought up by both of you.
And then Councilmember Bajorquez and Councilmember Sisk, I think both of you wanted to say something. Councilmember Sisk is unmuted already, so I'll defer to her.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the council kind of stays in line with our mission for healing and the truth and healing, and that if we're being requested to support something that is clearly addressing a healing or a truth correction, that we should have a process to be able to offer that, regardless of I don't know, it's like, I think once we get to the real initial issues that we're trying to help reverse, I think things that are coming from the communities are going to help us to do and to correct things a little more quickly than what we're going to be able to do on our own. And that we should be open to hearing some of those things that could, make this commission look like, we mean business. We are actually doing something here. And that some people might, call that the low-hanging fruit, or something that's very clear that should have the support of the council, to maybe to the governor's office, or maybe to, even about the ICWA process here in California. I mean, we have a lot of issues that a lot of our Native people don't get services, or don't get the kind of support they need because of the unrecognized status. And we should be able to do something. That's I don't want us to just turn out and like California Indian Legal Services. I understand how they might need to do that, but at the same time, I also see the injustice that happens because the unrecognized tribes have no representation.
Before we turn to Councilmember Bojorquez, one item to think about maybe is the value of making just even a position. There's other mechanisms where there's resolution making authority that can sometimes be community driven with recommendations, and that way you could have the ability to take a position on, for example, the S word or the R word without having to write 20 letters to different organizations, but have it be the official position of the California Truth and Healing Council that this is an offensive thing. So just putting that out there for thought. Councilmember Bojorquez.
Thank you. And actually, you touched on it a little bit. I was just going to ask what other mechanisms that we had or that we might set in place that we can review these case by case, so that we can offer, support for a cause, for a movement that coincides with our mission of truth and healing and reconciliation.
I mean, you're building it. You're building the plane as you fly it. So if you'd like to have a mechanism, we can start looking into what that looks like. I know in other larger bodies that do take larger positions to be useful to individual tribal communities, there's kind of an annual or semi-annual process for considering those position items. And then it goes through discussion and all of that. So that could be incorporated into this work so that it doesn't completely overtake the council and is on a timeline, but still allows you to be effective in being responsive to the community.
I have a question too. If we did want to, we're getting a lot of requests about a particular position. Could this also be work that goes into the subcommittees? If it's related to the work of a subcommittee, maybe they would be the body that could kind of wade through it all and, clean it up, or however you want to phrase that, so that when it comes to the overall council, there won't be as much of that work to do. It's just a thought I was having.
I do have one thought, hearing a little bit more of this discussion. The principle is if we're gonna support the notion of issuing support letters or whatever the action is, somebody needs to vet these on our behalf. And I'm not sure who that would be, whether it's an individual here or do we form a subcommittee of like 3? Lord knows there's plenty of work to be done without this, but just thinking out loud, kind of Chairman Bojorquez's remarks, that would be one. And then, proceed on a case by case basis. They would be vetting to see that the cause or the request meets the mission of, at least in my mind, meets the mission of what it is we're trying to accomplish, so we can maximize our time efficiency. Anyhow, delegate it to somebody is basically what I'm saying, and then proceed from there.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. And I also think that related to that, I think, Christina, you had mentioned as well in the meeting that there are some things that are implicate the governor, so that we would also, that would be something that would be subject to consideration in that context as well. So there's several different layers of vetting that may need to happen.
Yeah, right.
Any further comment or discussion on this item, or just process generally? Okie doke. If not, then is there any public comment on this item, Justin?
No hands raised.
Okie doke. And so just also for clarity for those joining, you can speak to any of the, okay, yeah. And so just for clarity for those who would like to comment on anything, when we ask for public comment on the agenda item, it should be specific to the agenda item. So any comments here should be talking about bylaws, process, some of the issue areas that the folks on the council were speaking about. If you have, when and if there is a motion or an action, there will be a call for public comment, and you can comment specific to that motion, but you'll also have later outside of the motion an opportunity to comment on just the general agenda item. And then if you are not talking about anything that's specifically agendized, then we ask you refrain from public comment until the 3 p.m. public comment period. So Justin, do you want to go ahead and open up for public comment on this agenda item?
Sure, will do. Joseph, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Hi, good afternoon. This was actually a question rather than a comment. I was wondering if, well, my apologies. I see it's actually in the chat. Yeah, I was going to ask if you could repeat the URL on the where this was published, but I see you put it in the chat. So thank you for that. That was all for me.
Thank you. And then you said there was one more commenter.
They lowered their hand.
Okie doke. If there are no further raised hands, then we will move on. And Justin, can you very quickly explain how to raise hands if you're dialing in, just in case we have folks that are not joining through an app?
I need to confirm what the keys are to press. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. *9 to raise your hand.
Great, thank you. So if there's no further public comment, we'll move on to the subcommittees. So Subcommittee A is the Youth Council, and this is discussion of who should be on this subcommittee and if you'd like to take action. You can also discuss beyond staffing the subcommittee, but once the subcommittee is staffed, it can meet at its own initiative, can give recommendations, and can ask us for further resources, and then also meet with outside partners. So I'll leave it to the council to discuss.
There's one more hand raised.
Okay, let's allow them to speak if it's to the prior agenda item.
Okay. Janelle, I've allowed you to speak.
Hi, thank you. I actually had some trouble logging in. You guys seem to have some technical issues, and my cousin is trying to access the meeting as well. Is there a different meeting ID I can share with her? Or am I able to invite her somehow on Zoom?
My impression is that it's the link that's in the agenda, and you should be able to just click that. Justin, is there an alternate way that folks can get in, or like a meeting room on Zoom?
The link in the agenda is the only link I'm aware of.
Okay, so if the agenda link doesn't work for technical reasons, you can also dial in, or you can watch on CalSpan.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll give her that information. Thank you.
Great. Okie doke. Any other raised hands?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, so we're now again on the Youth Council for the subcommittees. I can speak a bit more about, so on this, remember, you all formed this at the suggestion of public comments that there should be a youth component to this council. There's been a lot of interest in this and support for this in the listening sessions over the past 2 months. And so once this is formed, we can work with the subcommittee to go do a couple more listening sessions specific to this subcommittee to see kind of what this looks like. So There were some suggestions that there be, different kinds of groups within the youth council. So for example, college oriented or CSU, UC oriented or the like. Really, that's all kind of, business for the subcommittee to sort out and to think through. But that's what this would be, is leading that effort, figuring out what it would look like, helping facilitate those meetings, and then helping that helping those youth engage directly with this council.
I've had a few different thoughts about this over the past couple of weeks. And one of the things that I'm toying with, because one of the things I've heard also is that other commissions and other council also have elders advisory councils. And so I'm wondering if what we are actually talking about is putting together potentially some kind of advisors to the council, right? Which could include youth and elders, or, whichever kind of, from across the state, to help drive some of the work, the substantive work of the issue areas that we may be looking at. That's a change to what we've already decided to do, so I'm hesitant about even kind of mentioning it here. But just based on the conversation with the folks at the Permanent Forum, kind of learning from what their different approaches have been, that's what, if we do a youth council, shouldn't we also have it, elders? I mean, it makes sense, right? I don't know. So it's just thinking about the structure and what do we need to kind of do to help complement and to drive the work that we're doing.
I agree with that. That's if anything, that's balance. And so what I'm thinking about though is the notion that college students are in the youth group category. I normally don't think of the world in those terms, but I suppose I could be a minority of one in thinking that way. But I mean, youth groups, look around at something like Unity, the National Youth Group, that usually ages out at 18. I think there may be some 19-year-olds, but and other groups across the country, youth seems younger, I don't know, 6 to 18 generally. And then what is the term that we're using for other third-party constituencies that that would also advise or provide counsel or specialized information along the way? Is there a term that we have for that? I think hypothetically, you've spoken, Christina, in the past about, I don't know, maybe native anthropologists or faculty else in the state, native faculty or otherwise. Is there a catch-all term that you've been using? Anyway, if there is, I was just thinking that that under that heading, maybe college students would fall. Because when I think of elders and I think of youth, I'm thinking of, okay, these are demographics. They're age cohorts, and they have, I think we acknowledge they have a special voice to be heard, a perspective that's different based on time, experience, and age for elders, and certainly based on fresh outlook for youth and experience as well, and can articulate things in ways that I think us as bracketed adults between 18 and pick your senior age, 70. I don't know, that we don't normally think of. So elders and youth provide that. And I think college students have, it's hard to categorize or pigeonhole college students as a unique voice, because maybe in a political spectrum, they can come from all shades and colors. And that's just for starters. So it's hard to say, okay, here's the college student demographic and their monolithic voice. So I don't know that fits as well into the category of, being part of the youth demographic, the youth segment. Anyway, enough on that. Thanks.
I completely agree. I mean, the idea that college students are 18 to 22 years old went out with the Second World War the vast majority of college students, particularly Native American college students, are in their mid-20s. They might be transfers from community college. They're working, they have kids. Most of our college students at my university tend to be in their mid-20s. Some, quite frankly, we have people that graduate, they're in their 70s. And so I think they should be their own cohort. I like the idea, though, of, we can discuss this at a later time, of, having this youth group, and where we start with, let's say, elders and college students is through a mentoring program where we link all of these groups, where perhaps, tribal elders are serving as mentors for our youth group. And college students are doing exactly the same thing, serving that mentorship role, because we want to make sure that that cultural knowledge is being passed on. And ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create the leaders of this group for the future, whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So anything that we do in regards to these different cohorts should be really linked. And, my personal opinion is linked towards training our next generation of leaders to carry this forward.
Absolutely. I appreciate hearing that.
One piece of information for this group to think, sorry, council member, but I do want to get one.
Yeah, I agree with and I reflect those sentiments, because as a graduate student, I'm definitely not youth. And when you look at graduate students, I mean, in my program, there's a lot of people in their 30s and 40s. So, I mean, let's not forget the grad students. And also I've gotten feedback from the community that, there needs to be college, the way the state's interacting with the students needs to be its own effort. There's like a lot to do there. I've heard people say they think that California Native students should have fee waivers. I mean, there's a whole list people have that are dealing with our system at the university level. So, I mean, that kind of seems like its own effort.
One piece on that that we heard in listening sessions was the tribal colleges and how they also were serving folks that are a little bit older, coming back to education and trying to come back in a way that is comfortable for them culturally and also just community-based. But one piece I wanted to put out there for this group to think about is, I know there's a Native-oriented kind of knowledge cultural transmission fellowship that I think just closed, but that's something that has been a focus of, I think, a national organization. But there's also this thing, and bear with me, it's a little out there, but there's this this program or fellowship-ish community-based thing in Japan and Hiroshima, where they're actually doing the cultural knowledge experience-based story keeping even, which would really be kind of a nice fit in the context of this council. Of they've got survivors of the bombings who haven't told their stories to anybody, and they find a youth that is going to be their story keeper, who keeps that story to make sure that it never is forgotten, but that it's also, you know, very much a part of that cultural heritage. So just something to think about in the context of this work. One thing you mentioned, Councilmember Makara, was unity as well. And I don't know if the whole group is familiar with that, so it might be worth chatting about that and how that was created and what its purpose was, if you feel like it, but don't feel like you have to.
I don't know. I don't know the background on how it was created or why. I just know that it is a national organization that exists to promote Native youth identity, wellness, cohesion, and I think even worldview. My own tribe's participation in unity actually is relatively recent, over the last 10 years. But the organization's been around a lot longer, and I think I've seen them from what I see. They can be issue based and responding to, you know, DAPL or other serious big issues, or a myriad more regional and local issues that they can kind of coalesce as a national organization and support. I guess the word is more or less simultaneously. So I don't know if that helps or not, but there's probably online at unity.org or something like that. I think Unity may actually be an acronym. I could be wrong on that. But just for what it's worth, the perspective of youth is really important, because I think certainly the voice, and I can only say that from my experience, it was probably a little further back in the last 10 years. I don't know how long the term and the concept of decolonization has been popularized over the last decade or so. But when I first heard it, it was amongst some of our own tribal youth who now are in our mid or late 20s or between 25 and 30. But they were the ones talking about things we were doing as adults, as that's so colonial, or we need to decolonize our activities here or that. And I wasn't thinking of the world in those terms to that point. And now it seems almost cliche sometimes, but it's an important concept when you recognize, because the generation before me and before them didn't really think about, and certainly my generation didn't think about the world in terms of this is a colonial based activity or building or food or whatever. But our young people are doing that, and they see the world differently, and they have a voice that is different and adds to the discussion that we're having. So we certainly need to do whatever we can to incorporate that perspective. And I think there, suffice to say, we can all think of a number of examples that we can tap to either model or bring to the table. Anyhow, that's probably a little more than you asked for, Christina.
Thank you. Any thoughts on this? Any more discussion? Any more action?
This is Joe. It might be worth considering a subcommittee, maybe spinning out like a 1-unit course through a community college online for youth, statewide Native American youth, to be introduced to some of these terms, decolonization, etc. Because they're gonna have their mettle tested as natives through a whole bunch of things, of course, and already have. But maybe there's a role we could play through some of the insights that we gain from talking to so many people within our tribal communities about these things that have been there from the beginning. Like I think about every time I hear on the news people talking about America's original sin, I'm not outraged. I just go, well, to me, the original sin was a genocide to the Native Americans. And then, a few years later, a lot of people were brought here from Africa. I don't want to politicize that, but I think a lot of people don't even see us on the radar for like 90% of our population in what's now the continental U.S. being eliminated by 1900. So there's so many terms like that, decolonization, but I think it might be really helpful to our youth to offer something like that, to develop it and offer, give them an opportunity to get introduced to this stuff. Some people grow up with it, hearing about it all the time, these terms, but unfortunately, a lot of people, just maybe look at the world a little bit more through either rose-colored glasses, or maybe it's just somebody shielded them from some of these pressures or realities. Thank you.
Can I just add a point, dovetail a point with Joseph's remarks right now? Something that I see a lot. I think we all see this. California, in particular, seems to through the decades, be one of the entities that kind of sets the frame for what popular culture is in the United States and then across the world, I suppose. And it's against this background that, you know, our Indian people live, and you know, we have all our sacred sites, and the fabric of our own tribal nations and people that you know, you've got all this noise, all this static out there, and it competes with attention amongst our individuals, certainly our youth, but not just them, you know, everybody. And so what Joseph is saying is that to create an opportunity to have a place for youth, our youth to certainly be exposed to this discussion that we're having and why we're having a truth and healing process. You know, what made it necessary, you know, is something that it's very important work. And to assume that it's just going to happen, you know, if we don't make those efforts, to assume it's going to happen through some other mechanism, either the schools or the curriculum, is foolish. We know that it's not going to happen by itself. So we would serve certainly our Indian people well if we create that opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Christina, can I make clear? So one of the things that we need to do then is potentially identify, is it no more than 2 council members that would want to sit on the youth committee? And then I assume that the committee itself would help, like when we're thinking forward about when we actually go out into communities, right, connecting with the tribes in the area with their youth programs and so forth, and making sure people are coming in involved. It's kind of one of our outreach arms to the youth. Is that okay? I'm understanding. Okay.
So I've been sitting here and soaking everything all in, and I agree with Chairman Carl's earlier statement of youth typically being 18 or younger, and also thinking of the opportunities that were given to me as a youth in learning. And for myself, I would love to sit on that subcommittee. I think that we have to start somewhere, even if it is looking at, like was said, other entities, right? Why are we going to recreate the wheel? If we're going to look at some of the other organizations that are out there and how their processes work, I think that we need to dive through that and look whether it's Native driven, whether it's already just California state driven, like the California Association of Student Councils, the state association. So I think that there are some things that we need to look at, and in order to do that, we need a group of our own to be able to start to dive into that, to bring back. And I'd be more than happy to sit on that if there's any other council members that would love to join me. Thank you.
I would love to see us form this subcommittee today.
I have a question. We're talking about what youth is, and we're hearing under 18 a lot. But I've been when I was younger, I remember seeing ages like 23 or 25 as the cutoff for when you're defined as a youth, when I was still a youth. Because I remember thinking, oh, when I'm 25, I'm not a youth anymore. So whose job is it to figure this out? Is it our job in forming these subcommittees, or do we just give a real broad idea of what the subcommittee is, and then it's the subcommittee that decides that? Like, who figures that out?
I would say that the subcommittee will, and I think that the best path for this entire group is to rely on community-driven engagement. So I would say you'll staff the subcommittee, they'll go out, they'll listen, they'll have listening sessions, they'll bring back recommendations to this group, and then this group can consider all of the recommendations based on all of that outreach, research, all of that. So the short answer is you can decide that. Right now you can form it without making that decision, and then go out and get more feedback as to what the community sees. There are people who are 30 who think they're still youth, so.
And I have another question. about this in general. Are these subcommittees, are they going to have size limitations? Are they going to be structured like committees are structured sometimes with like secretaries and chair people? Will they have quorum rules? Like are all those structures?
The subcommittees they're limited on how many of the voting members can be on them just for the Bagley-Keene purposes, but they're not limited in terms of size, how you want to do things, because they're not technically subject, because they're not a full body of this council. You can kind of do whatever you want as the subcommittee. So if one subcommittee feels like it operates better by doing things, in a, way that is, all over the place and going everywhere, that's fine. If there's a subcommittee where you function better in a more organized fashion, you can do it that way too.
Christina, I put a link to Unity in the chat. It is an acronym. It's a clever one.
And I do believe they have a California representative, like a California youth representative to Unity, among other things.
That sounds familiar. Yes. Okay.
So can I ask how if this this youth committee would be supported by us, or how are we going to help help organize or help them be a part of it, or what is the commitment there? Or can we do something like that? As not everybody has a whole lot of money to do things, but in forming committees, it usually means some time and energy and maybe even some travel. I don't know, because up in our country, we have no transit systems, no trains and buses that, and there's lots of miles between the areas here.
So in terms of council member travel, your travel for these meetings, once they're normal, are all going to be covered. We can also talk about, depending on how many subcommittee meetings you're having, covering that travel too, because it would be directly associated with the work of the council. In supporting, it's all, I think, a conversation. So if it's going to be a huge price tag, then we have to talk a bit about it, but we can also work with you on finding partnerships and host tribes and host organizations as well. Part of what the partnerships for funding subcommittee, if it's formed, would do is also kind of work with philanthropy on where they could be supportive of community engagement and support travel for children, elders, people who want to come and tell their stories and engage. So it's all a conversation. I think once the subcommittee is formed and once it has kind of a vision, we can work with you on how to develop that and how to schedule that out and how to use even state resources to help host things. But I would say all of this too is, as the subcommittees get more fully fleshed out, you can talk to each other about what you kind of want as your vision, and then we can think about what that looks like in terms of resourcing and pricing, and then have that go to the funding committee to try to find some support for. And where we can cover things, we'll kind of sort all of that out. So sorry, that was a very bureaucratic answer to what should be an easy question. But we will help support you administratively and help you set up things. That's the short answer.
And just to clarify, because we are the primary purpose or function of the subcommittees is to do outreach and to gather information to then bring it back to the council that can then decide to take action or what have you, or figure out how we're going to incorporate that, because this will also map well onto education, right? If we do substantive driven issue area subcommittees, there's going to be a lot of overlap, which is probably good and fine, I guess, but there's just still not sure how we're dividing everything, like how this is, because we only have what 2 subcommittees really, or 3 identified, but we haven't, there's probably potentially 10 more on top of that.
Yeah, and I think that once you get to the point of looking at issue areas after the whole, listening more and all of that, and even maybe convening some of, the youth committee, the elder committee and all of that, it may be that you think that it's no longer needed to have these structural committees and they collapse into something else, or you think it's needed to have these structural committees because the people who are not council members who make it up are really key and critical, and maybe they become non-voting members of this council as well, and it collapses into that. So you have a lot of flexibility in what you can do. So I suppose at this point, if there's another council member who would like to, we've heard council member Bajorquez is interested in staffing this. If there's another one that would like to staff this as well, please feel free to volunteer yourself. Or if there's a council member not present that you'd like to consider on this subcommittee, you can table it until they are present so that you can see if they're even interested. But
Yeah, can we do that? Is it possible also to announce it? Because there are, like Alexis, I know she's super engaged. There's a lot of different people that might want to be involved in this. So I want to make sure because again, there are so many potential issue areas. I know myself, I'm just not ready to commit to any one yet because there are so many potential places to put your energy. If there is a strong preference amongst people that are not here, I'd rather not take that spot if in fact they would rather prioritize that for themselves.
I echo what Kusla said. I'm really interested in working with college level youth because that's what I do for a living. And I just want to see how this all fleshes out. So I'd rather have someone who's really passionate working with younger individuals. And so, yeah, if we could table it and then maybe make it an.
Councilmember Phelps, you just got muted, but it sounds like, okay.
I'm
table
back.
it and then, yeah.
Exactly. Table it and then see who else is interested. And then, me personally, I'd like to see where we're going to go with the college age. And then before I make a commitment.
Okay, and then for clarification too, the subcommittees don't have to just meet with the subcommittees as long as you properly agendize and have an open meeting aligned with your subcommittee. So all of you are not precluded from engaging in those conversations as long as we give everyone a heads up, give people the ways to engage and do it 10 days in advance. So that's just for clarity. If there are folks that want to be engaged but may not have the time to be able to do it, may want to be more focused in other areas.
I'll volunteer for this committee. I think I'd like to see these other folks be part of the college age group, but I have 5.5 grandchildren and under 5 years old, and I have many nieces and nephews. So if there are no other volunteers, I would volunteer for this subcommittee. And I do feel strongly that something Chairman Maccaro said earlier, that we need to, we have a lot of things to get done. So I think the more we can get done and the farther along we can move with each one of these meetings, the better off we'll be. So.
That's great, Chairwoman. Thank you.
Great. So we have 2 council members present who have indicated interest. There may be other council members who are interested. You have the option to either act and form and appoint the present members, or you can table it till next meeting and see who else is interested. It's up to you.
I'll make a motion to move forward with the 2 council members to establish the Youth Commission.
And I'll second.
So for the record, that was Councilmember Kessler Mata with the motion, the second Councilmember Phelps. Is there any council member discussion on this motion specifically? Hearing none, is there any public comment on the motion specifically? And again, to clarify for those who might have public comment, this is specific to this motion to appoint these 2 council members to this subcommittee and not the bigger discussion.
Okay, one thing I was thinking of is for the youth that are going to be in this committee, that would it be like our committee, like they'll be unrecognized and recognized and also considered, because you know it's kind of hard to find unrecognized in school, in the colleges.
I think it's a principle of this council under charter for everyone to be included. So I would, you know, unless there was a deviation in the subcommittees, there's a charge to work with all Native people.
Yeah, but to make sure that they're there.
And Justin, did we have any raised hands on the motion?
One raised hand. Janelle, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Okay.
Volunteer to be a part of the subcommittee, or do you have to already be on a committee to be part of the subcommittee?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that, but I think it was members of the public and people who are not on the council to volunteer on the subcommittees. Is that?
Yes, that's right. Sorry, I'm driving, so there's a little bit of road noise.
The subcommittee work is open to anybody. So the subcommittee itself that's directed by the council members could choose to limit things, but the whole point is to engage the public so they can actually create, they can have more people kind of help with this outside of the council itself.
Great. Well, I would love more information on how to make that happen, if there's an application process or, you know, anything like that.
Great. So what we'll do once this subcommittee is formed is our staff will meet with the subcommittee to think about how they want to move forward and whether they want to recruit other partners. And so then we'll have more clarity on that probably before the next listening session.
Okay, sounds good.
Any further comment on the motion?
No hands raised.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
Is the purpose of this committee to work on youth issues, or is it the purpose to populate it with youth members? And then does that mean we need to establish ahead of time what youth is? So when we put the call out for members, we don't end up with a committee of a bunch of 30-year-olds. I mean, you know what I'm asking? Like, I feel like
yeah.
there needs to be some clarification.
As I understand it, based on your previous discussions as a council, this is for youth to populate it, to engage with this council on kind of all issues. But again, I think the subcommittee can bring that recommendation to the council as well once it's formed. Because I would envision this being subcommittee meets, we kind of figure out kind of the direction of how they want to get a little bit more staffing if they want, or a little bit more partnership, and then also goes out and does its own kind of consultation and community engagement to think about what this is too, in addition to populating it.
So when you say that it's going to bring those definitions to the council, does that mean the 2 council members on that will decide that, or a more full committee? But if it's a more full committee, don't we need to know who qualifies to be on the committee before that happens? Like, define what youth is in order to populate it?
Yeah, and so in order to find that out and to bring it back to the council for action, the subcommittee itself needs to go talk more, I think, to the community. And so they'll bring it back to you. They can't act on their own is the point. And that's why there's only 2 of them. So anything that they choose to do in terms of direction, they'll bring back to this full council. And so what youth is as defined, what the issues they're going to look at as defined, they'll bring all of that back here with ideally some further community engagement.
But do they also need to bring back the structure? So this is how we're proposing to devise the youth committee based on our initial work, or is that within their authority? And then Or can we make recommendations like, you don't have anybody from Central, or you don't have anybody from North, there's no Karooks on the, I don't know, whatever. Something like that.
Critics are mandatory on the,
Exactly.
yeah, so I think it's kind of open-ended. I think in general on Bagley-Keene type of subcommittees, there's a lot of latitude in how the work gets done itself, but when there's anything that implicates the broader work of the council, that it would have to come back to the full council. And so, I would advise with all the subcommittees where there are big decisions, like you're cutting off youth at age 18, that you bring that to the council with whatever backup you have. Whether it's, we've heard from all these listening sessions that 18 is the age, and that's who we're getting interest from. And so that's, I would envision that with all of the subcommittees, but you can also think about this in your process discussions, as well as you start thinking about it, of like, what are the baseline items that you're okay delegating to the subcommittee, and what are the things that you really want to come back to the council. Additional comments on the motion?
We'll have to call for the question if there's no further. Call for the question then?
Great. Then we will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Kessler-Mata.
Yes.
Council.
Yes. No, sorry.
Councilmember Maccaro.
Yes.
Councilmember Burris.
Yes.
Councilmember Sisk.
Yes.
Councilmember Bojorquez.
Yes.
Councilmember Harper.
Yes.
Councilmember Giovanetti, and I apologize, I didn't mention this on at the beginning of this. You're all voting members for the purposes of this meeting, as some of the alternates are here in place of others. So Councilmember Giovanetti.
Yes.
Councilmember Elliott Santos.
Yes.
And Councilmember Phelps.
Yes.
Motion carries, and the subcommittee is now staffed with Councilmember Elliott Santos and Councilmember Bojorquez. So we will be in touch with you all to see how you want to move forward. With that, we'll move on to the next subcommittee item, and then we'll go to the broader public comment at the end of the subcommittee piece if folks have public comment outside of the scope of these items, unless the council wants to do it differently. But the next one is the academic partnerships. And again, as a reminder, this is to basically liaise with academic institutions that are wanting to partner with the council. This is not necessarily the committee for examining, land grant institutions, complicity, lack of funding, lack of enrollment. This is more about institutions that are either doing work that's aligned and want to partner with the council, or institutions that are offering fellowship opportunities, or institutions that may want to provide archiving services. So this one was formed the last meeting, and this again would be about staffing this subcommittee so that it can move forward. Seems we've hit the period of Friday afternoon where we hit a wall. You have, just for clarity, I'm going to recommend that if you hit 3 p.m. that we just go into public comment, since that's what we expressed would be the agenda. But just for a time check, we're at 2:25 at this point.
Also, I think, at least I'm quiet because it's a good idea and it's not controversial, and it's something great. And I don't think it's very controversial. And so perhaps that's why we're a little quiet right now. It's
Great.
definitely something we should do.
So if there are folks that would like to be on this subcommittee, please speak now.
Could you remind me how this helps the truth and healing goals that we have?
This is really, this helps because it helps get you more resources to do the work. And so, or not. And so what we've had pretty much as soon as this even became kind of a concept, we've been approached from, like, for example, UC Hastings, who is doing a truth and reconciliation type of initiative. And they've been working with some of the local tribes, and they want to see how or if any of that material could be helpful to the council. Another instance of this being helpful is the Maine Wabanaki Council that you heard from back in December. They actually partnered with a university over there to archive all of the findings and all of the recordings and all of the work that was done over there, so that it wasn't housed with the state, because they felt like there was that lack of trust there. So it's basically, this helps because you are amplifying your ability to do this work, and you're also pulling in institutions that may have some accountability to the populations that are seeking healing.
Okay, so that would be open to students at a university in a program, let's say counseling or something like that, or history or anthropology, that would deal or at least investigate or do some research on some of the issues of, like, how the California Indians lost all the land, or that, how did some tribes end up being recognized when all of the Indians paid for all of the lands?
So it could be that. So if the subcommittee wants to find fellowships or wants to have those kind of opportunities, that's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, from my perspective, one of the values of it is that I think it would be good for us to establish some policies around what people can and can't do with the information. We're going to be collecting a huge amount of primary source data, and there's a lot of vultures out there, right? And they will happily take that and do whatever they want with it. But I think if we can protect the voice of the people, the voices of the people that are coming to us as much as possible, with whatever kind of policy statement or tools that we have at our disposal, I think it would be good to be able to try and establish that, to propose those, to develop some of those things in the committee and then bring it forward. And then also, again, vetting of vultures. There's just, I'm in academia, so I feel comfortable saying there's a lot of them. So I just want to be careful with who's potentially interested. And also to prioritize Native academics, California Indian academics. We have quite a few now throughout the state. There's over 50 California Indians with PhDs in various fields, right? Working everywhere from Humboldt State on down to San Diego. So it's, there's a lot of power, and I think we could hopefully partner, of course, with folks that are interested in that are Native themselves.
Additionally, there are some existing academics who I think are interested in partnering because they already have a lot of primary source material. So you've got, like Ben Madley down at UCLA has a ton of primary source interviews and would probably be interested in working with this council. You've got work that's in process with people who are in their PhD candidacy. I don't know what the terms are. I only went to law school. So, but they're in the process. And so I think there's a lot of existing resources that all of you could be pulling from too. Even, the language archives at Berkeley, things like that.
They're working on their dissertation, so they've got a lot of research that's never been read. And you also have master's theses out there. There's just so much research out there that's never been tapped. It's not at a library, it's not been cataloged, but the institutions know they exist.
So do we have volunteers? Because this sounds extremely important.
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
I'll volunteer.
Great. So we've got 2 volunteers, Councilmember Phelps and Councilmember Burris. Again, nothing is precluding other council members from engaging with this group. We just, again, have to notice anytime there's more than 2 of you. Are there any other council members who'd like to put in their okey doke?
I'd be interested, but I'm just happy to maybe coordinate with the notice process. So I've got plenty on my plate. So happy just to do the notice stuff.
I've got a lot on my plate too. So if there's anyone that really wants to do it more than me, it's not like something I need to do, but I'm volunteering.
Well, I'm in the same boat, but kind of my bailiwick, so I almost feel I have to say, yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
Well,
It
I'd like to
sounds
make
like-
that, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to call for that.
Okay. I'd like to make that motion to have Councilmember Phelps and Councilmember Burris be on this academic partnership subcommittee.
And I'll second that motion.
Oh, sorry.
What was the second? I apologize. See, when you point though, I think they're all indifferent.
No, I'm pointing right at Kusla because I think she said she seconded.
Okay. I'll
But
take it.
if there's discussion right now, I'd like to ask for a clarification. Did Kusla, did you say you were interested in serving on this as well?
It would just be helpful if whenever they're going to have meetings, like if there's enough leeway time that we could do the notice process so I can sit in on them, but it's not, I'm not essential to it. So I can always raise heck when we come back to full council. It's not a problem.
Well, and then hearing the brief exchange you had with Councilmember Burris, I'm wondering if does it behoove us to include you in this so that there's no question about whether you're authorized to serve on the subcommittee, and then it's just a matter of you guys working it out, saying, "Hey, I'm not available today. Can you sit in?" Or
You can do that. An alternate. As long as no more than 3 of you are in those meetings and discussing.
Okay.
I would really
No more
be
than-
comfortable with something like that because we're all so swamped right now. And, at least our workload at university, of course, in the summertime goes down, but then it just jumps right back up. So the more individuals that can participate, better.
so if you were willing, because I'd like to memorialize that, council, to include her as an alternate.
Sounds good.
Councilmember Elliott Santos, would you like to amend your motion to,
Absolutely.
and then the seconder, I'm assuming you're okay with that, but if you could.
I approve.
Okay.
And for the record, just to clarify, the motion was by Councilmember Elliott Santos and then the second by Councilmember Kessler Mata. Is there further councilmember discussion? Hearing none. Is there any public comment on this specific motion?
I see one hand raised.
Okay, dope.
Lindsay, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, I was raising my hand so that I could inform you that I am definitely interested in being involved in the subcommittee and volunteering. So once the council decides and moves forward with that, I would love to be a part of it. Thank you.
Any other raised hands, Justin?
No raised hands.
Okay, doke. Then we will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Kessler Mata,
Yes.
Councilmember Macaro,
Yes.
Councilmember Burris,
Yes.
Councilmember Sisk,
Yes.
Councilmember Bojorquez,
Yes.
Councilmember Harper,
Yes.
Councilmember Giovanetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Elliott Santos,
Yes.
And Councilmember Phelps.
Yes.
Motion carries and the subcommittee is staffed accordingly. Moving on, this is the discussion and potential action on creating a funding partnership subcommittee. Again, as I've been mentioning, we've been having ongoing discussions with a couple of philanthropic partners. Specifically, we have been talking to the Decolonize Wealth Project, who would like to be more actively engaged in the work of this council, both in potentially a documentary type of space, but also in facilitating conversations with funders throughout the state as kind of an arm of this council. And this would be working aligned with them and potentially anyone else to help develop all of that. The funding pieces of this council are both near-term funding, things like I mentioned, funding elder and youth engagement and travel and those type of things, or even funding food at gatherings, things like that, that the state can't technically cover. But then also funding, because you can look at reparations actions, funding some of those actions that potentially the state or the feds may not be able to cover. So, and bringing in, I know Councilmember Kessler-Mata had mentioned accountability partners, where there's corporations in the state that continue to thrive, even though their success is predicated on the gold rush and those kind of actions, and that this group could potentially work with those corporations to have those corporate partnerships as well. So I'll leave it to the council to discuss and potentially act.
Christina, what is it you're looking for us to act on?
To create a subcommittee for partnerships on funding, and then to potentially staff that subcommittee as well.
Thank you.
And just for this subcommittees, if it does get formed, if it doesn't, staff will continue in pursuing some of these conversations, but it would be helpful to have an actual representative from the council or two to help with some of these conversations. For clarity, it's looking like there may be some convenings, monthly convenings with funders, and it would be helpful to have council members kind of describe the work and the potential for the.
Yeah, and just to mention something more about what Christina had said, I don't know if any of you noticed, but there's a company that recently announced a kind of fellowship called Pioneers in Justice. And it's because it's a company that was basically based in the gold rush era, the term pioneers in that context specifically means, literally like pioneers, right? It's literal reference. And they're dedicating money to Black, Indigenous, and other activists in and around the Bay Area. And it had occurred to me when I first saw that announcement that is a potential, there's issues, but then there's also potential, right? Which is to say that there should be some prioritization in general across California by companies and entities that have benefited from the land theft and all of these things to commit funds, if they're going to be committing funds, right, committing them to various projects and people that are moving us forward. And by people, I mean, right, whatever, like I actually have no idea what I mean by that, but right, projects that are related to the mission of the council and so forth.
Christina, is it possible, can we procedurally form or vote to form the subcommittee, but not put anybody on there today?
Sure. That's what you did with the other subcommittee, so that's perfectly fine.
Because to me, it seems pretty obvious that we need a funding subcommittee to sort through as we go. I don't know how long this whole effort is going to take. I think we chatted about that 2 or 3 years, or maybe 4 or 5. I don't know, but there may be, the opportunities that come to our doorstep and without much effort, perhaps. Others might have to be solicited for, but it's kind of a specialty endeavor at times to navigate and vet those things and bring them to the full council. And so that's why I say in my head, it's clear enough that we're going to need a subcommittee to do that. I think, having said that, I think I would like to make a motion to form the subcommittee, short of having a discussion of who would sit on that subcommittee right now. So I'll so move.
I'll second it.
That was a motion by Councilmember McCarroll and a second by Councilmember Harper. Do we have any council member discussion? Hearing none. Do we have any public comment? Any raised hands, Justin?
There was a hand raised just now, but it went down for Janelle.
Okay. So then we will go to a roll call vote. Councilmember Kessler-Mata.
Yes.
Councilmember Maccaro.
Yes.
Councilmember Burris.
Yes.
Councilmember Sisk.
Yes.
Councilmember Bojorquez.
Yes.
Councilmember Harper.
Yes.
Councilmember Giovanetti.
Yes.
Councilmember Elliott Santos.
Yes.
And Councilmember Phelps.
Yes.
Great, motion carries, and the subcommittee on funding partnerships is formed. We will carry this item over to the next meeting in case folks want to think about who wants to be on it. In the interim, as things come in, we'll send general updates to the entire council, just BCC, so you're not discussing with each other. And that way, if there is anything that needs to move, you're all aware of it. Okay, the last item is for other subcommittees. If you wanted to have a discussion on potentially other subcommittees, we do have about 18 minutes left of the council member time before we want to get into public comment. So feel free to discuss, propose, or think through what you might want to do and propose it for the next agenda as well.
I want to say really quick, I think from everything we're hearing, it's kind of safe to say we'll need maybe 2 additional subcommittees related to education, one through more like the K through 12 area, and then one at the college level. I think we've had a lot of comments in the listening sessions related to education in the state. I think that those are 2 different issues, though. I'm just throwing that out there for discussion. I'm not necessarily proposing a committee at this point, but seems like the direction we're going in.
Yeah, I would like to propose a committee on the unrecognized or the disenrolled, because no matter what we discuss, they're always left out of the education processes and opportunities for everything else that considers, health, housing, everything. But it needs to be figured out as to what can be done about that. I mean, I was just looking at the new, what is it, $850 million coming for BIA schools or K-12 education. And all the unrecognized kids, they can't even attend those kinds of schools. So somehow there has to be some fairness. It's one thing to be unrecognized, but it's another thing to have no rights and no support to continue tribal ways. So I would propose a committee, maybe 2 committees, one on the disenrollments and what happens to their rights and their future, and then also the unrecognized. Because the other thing I saw on that posting is that it was for Native Americans and Alaskan Natives. And, my thought on that is that California should be a separate, like the Alaskan Natives. It's like we should have a separate determination because of the California claims case. But it has to be addressed if we're going to talk about fairness, for all the California Indians and in the opportunities that exist to continue to be tribal.
Thank you, Councilmember Sisk. And it may be actually worth kind of tracking back to some of the listening sessions and the comments that we got in those sessions, that there was a lot of conversation about that, and that might actually be something that's under the issue areas that you want to all examine after kind of taking some more listening, doing some more community listening, and especially once we get into kind of post-COVID travel type of environment, but that there was some conversation about even the potential of looking at the historical precursors for those two things, you know, the census rolls and how those came about, and then also how tribes were even formed and recognized initially. And then also Councilmember Burris mentioned the IRA issues for tribes as well. So I would say in thinking about subcommittees you need right now, I would think, I would advise that you think about what you might need structurally to be able to do the work moving forward, with the idea that issue area specific subcommittees you'll form once you have an idea of those issues that you do want to grapple with and how you're going to think about them.
One thought I had when I was reading some of that and listening to what's his name at Davis Smith is that you know, the Cherokee Nation identifies itself by the Dawes rolls, and as long as you're on the Dawes rolls, then you have membership. You can apply for membership. Well, in California, we have the California judgment rolls, and we should utilize that the same way that Cherokee Nation utilizes their very own record of account, because they were moved from state to many states, I guess, and not really knowing the real tribes they were from, but now they're all Cherokees. You know, the whole nation is there, but we actually do have a judgment roll that identifies different tribes as well as certified all of those Indians as Indians of California before the state. So we have, you know, we have a structure of something to use. I mean, we're not starting from scratch. But just having a subcommittee to maybe go over some of these things and find out, you know, how do we end this? Since 1980, you know, this discriminatory treatment has caused a heartache for so many, and will continue if we don't address it when we have this chance.
So, oh, Councilmember Kessler-Mata, would you like to say something?
Yeah, so no, I agree with Chief Sisk that we should establish a subcommittee on to make sure that unrecognized communities are being attended to in all of the work that we're doing in the council, and that's kind of a good way to keep watch and make sure voices are included. And the other thing is, I do think, and this is really important, that by the end of our recommendations, by the end of 2025, if we're talking about some of the potential things that we've heard in listening sessions, right, like free education for California Indians, right, through the CSUs or whatever, right, some of those different types of things, we're going to be looking at needing to have a clear definition and articulation of who is California Indian. And that the work of the subcommittee would in part, I think, be charting or a clear understanding of what the historical context is, right? What are those key documents that we have to rely on who would be eligible, you know, so we can even have a conversation about who would fall under that category, right? And there are like at I think Davis, Kat Whiteley is there, and she's got a lot of knowledge about what happened with the 18 unratified treaties, what happened with the tribes that had signed those, and so on and so forth. So that type of knowledge from a fellow California native who's studying these things could also be a part of that. Because we do have a lot of folks that both, you know, in higher education, but also in, you know, just community members that have knowledge that could speak to those things. So, you know, if I know at one point someone had recommended, well, why don't we just rely on the judgment rules? Well, but then there are folks that weren't a part of the judgment rules. So there's a, you know, we need to think about what are all those, what about the mission records, right? Like how can we triangulate on all of this information to help come up with an inclusive, but yet clear, right? And somewhat definitive list of who can actually take advantage of some of the things that we may potentially be recommending, right? So it's a resource issue, but I think it starts in that kind of unrecognized subcommittee, potentially starts thinking about some of those things.
Great. So it's sounding like there are some ideas. It's sounding like there may need to be a little bit more thought and discussion on these and just where folks want to go. So maybe this is something we put on the next agenda item or the next meeting. One thing to think about just on Councilmember Kessler-Mata's piece is that this is really kind of a human rights council. And so I think that you're going to be tasked with thinking about what do the people who now inhabit this land owe to tribal nations as governments because of actual laws and treaties that and you know, things that were agreed on that may not have happened. And then what do the people who are here now owe to Native people as, you know, this legacy of genocide and the inheritors of this awfulness. So just something to put there as you're thinking about those issues of, you know, who is California Indian. So I'm going to propose that we move on to the next item. And here I'm kind of thinking this is more of an update. Oh, sorry. Did we have public comment on that, Justin?
There's 2 hands raised.
Okay.
I'll start with Janelle Perez.
Hi, thank you so much. All of these suggestions are great. Is there any sort of effort being made towards informing the tribes in California about these meetings? If not, I think that there should be a subcommittee that does that. And yeah, I think that's really important. I don't know if enough people know about this.
So I'll respond in part to that. The tribes are being informed of these meetings. We are, though, also in the process on staff side of contracting with a contractor to do short-term, like day-to-day public relations work for this council, and then also a bigger contract to kind of loop in some of the national and other kinds of efforts so that there's a heightened awareness given some of the comments, I think, from all of the council members that if this is going to work, it can't just be Native people talking to Native people, and that this really needs to be a bigger public awareness campaign. And so we're in the process of trying to get that stood up so that things are ready, hopefully within the next couple of months. Well, hopefully earlier than that, really, but so that there's a lot more awareness about how this work is moving forward before you get into the real meat of the work that you're doing as a council.
There's one more hand raised. Donna, I'll allow you to speak now.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. This is Donna Begay. Can you hear me? Oh, great. I like to see the heads. I don't know if my camera's working, but I'm going to say that I back up what Chief Kayleen Sis was mentioning about non-federally recognized tribes. I'm very fortunate to be half Navajo, so part of me is federally recognized. But the other part, being Tabatalabo from Kern Valley, has been a challenge all my life to seek educational funding and to seek housing and transportational needs for my tribal people in Kern Valley. So I would just say an easy start would take a look at past legislation, such as, like, an easy one would be being able to get accredited for teaching tribal language in a school. There was a bill that was passed a few years ago. And I remember talking to the chairman in Santa Barbara, the Shumash folks, and mentioning how I loved the fact that they were doing this, they were supporting this bill, and they championed it through and it got approved. But I also said it didn't include the non-federally recognized tribes. And we have to remember that the lines of federal recognition were drawn back in the late 1800s. Our languages and our cultural practices don't have lines. And you know it. You go to these cultural ceremonies, you go to our powwows, you go to the different traditional events throughout California, and you don't see those lines. So I would just say that maybe the subgroup on non-federally recognized tribes could take a look at the definition of what I see in the state of California as California Native American tribes, that is inclusive of both federally and non-federally recognized tribes, and that it's also something that we've been using and promoting and protecting our cultural landscapes through the CEQA Act. And so I just want to add that in, and I would gladly volunteer to help out. But what I would like to say is I would like to define what we can't focus on, what we would be losing effort in a sense of trying to gain a global type statewide federal recognition for these tribes that are not federally recognized, because that's a tough battle right there. So I would just put that as a caveat, that we focus more on perhaps fixing some things that are low-hanging fruit kind of things, and then we move forward with some core values that we want to focus on and get those things done.
Thank you, Donna. One piece that I've been thinking about for this council to think about is also the idea that, and this might be an unpopular thing to say, but that non-federally recognized tribes also disenroll. So just the idea of what as Native peoples, should Native peoples have access to, given that we're still here. So I'll just put that there, and then everybody can comment that I said something awful.
Yeah.
But
And as I said, that there will be some probably areas where they're just too hot to handle issues, and it'd be probably something we need to set aside, but focus on things that we can make some positive changes on, and it makes sense, and it helps with the truth building and healing.
thank you, Donna. Any other raised hands, Justin?
Kathy, Corey, I'm going to allow you to speak now. Kathy, I'm not sure if you're on mute, but go ahead and unmute yourself and you're free to speak.
Haley, Kathy Corey Chichansey. I would just like to speak on the mission of this council and the mission of truth and healing of Indian people. When you look at our Indian people in California, it doesn't matter whether one is unrecognized, whether one is disenrolled, whether one is state recognized, whether one is federally recognized. All Indian people have suffered the same historical trauma of our ancestors, and all of us deserve to have that truth and healing. I think that an integral part of that is dealing with the whole and bringing the whole back together. And I would hope that this council would be a mission in taking the time to do that. When I hear voices saying, we only have time for this, or we only have time for that, I feel that that is evading a really important issue on lateral trauma within our own tribes. And I'd just like to say that I fully support having a subcommittee on non-recognized and disenrolled for this to truthfully address truth and healing in California. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other raised hands, Justin?
No raised hands. Oh, Janelle just raised her hand.
Great. Before we get into that comment, just if council members do need to leave and we lose quorum, the next couple of items I don't anticipate you having to vote on, so it's okay if you need to go. Please go ahead with the public comment.
Thank you.
This is Joe. I
Hi,
wanted to add
everyone.
something.
This is Janelle, and I'm sorry, was someone else speaking?
No,
I can
it's
wait.
Okay.
you have the floor, Janelle.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to agree with the previous speaker. I really like the idea of having a special committee that's just focused on healing. You know, that who knows what that could look like, but there are different practices and different things and different modalities of healing that we're, you know, just starting to relearn or remember, or even like scientifically that we're coming to see are very valuable. So I really like that idea, and thank you so much for sharing that. I just wanted to vocalize that support.
Thank you, Janelle. And then Council Member Giovanetti, it sounded like you had.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'm not sure if anybody else saw the news item this week in the New York Times that I believe it's an institution connected to the Jesuit faith in the United States, that they're gonna pay $20 million, half of it directly to the descendants of two Africans that they, I guess in the early 1800s, were direct participants in moving these people or selling them into slavery. The descendants of those two slaves, there's concern or upset from some of them because they're not comfortable with the I guess the stated goal of the Jesuit faith to hold back 10 million of that 20 million to create something for social advocacy organization work. I think maybe those descendants want to see all of it go directly to those families who have suffered because of being forced into slavery because of that denomination. I think it's interesting in revealing something about you know, some part of the psyche of that faith.
Thank you, Council Member. And Justin, it looks like public commenters are still kind of in the council room after they speak. I don't know if we can demote them once they speak and then bring them back in once they want to have another public comment, but just something to flag in terms of process.
Okay, thank you.
And are there any other raised hands, Justin?
One raised hand from Donna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I think, is this the open comment period for the public at this point, just in general?
Not yet. We are still on the subcommittee agenda item.
Okay, I'll pass then. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other raised hands, Justin?
No.
Okay. So on the next item, culturally informed wellness practitioner, this is something that has funding under the state budget, and this is for primarily the talking circles, but also any space where a lot of the actual meat of this work will be getting done, where there's the potential to open up wounds because of historical trauma, or even just the outcomes and the effects of being part of a population that has been decimated so much, and some of the things that in modern day folks are dealing with in terms of families and behaviors and the like. So we've put out some questions for consultation, and I just wanted to run this by the committee. But we've heard that in looking to contract with culturally informed folks, that we should be trying to provide more options rather than fewer. So what we'd like to do is either get, have a contract with someone who will sub out to some different kinds of culturally informed wellness practitioners to be kind of a part of this, either in the actual talking circles themselves, or you know, as resources for folks to contact if they're struggling a bit. We've also heard that California Native people are preferred, but that there should be kind of a buffet of the types of people that are provided, that there should be, you know, maybe someone who's knowledgeable about historical trauma, maybe someone who's knowledgeable about family services, maybe someone who's knowledgeable about pan California Native healing, but then also folks that are more regional, which is kind of a lot of things, but it sounds like we can start to kind of work toward that. There's also some suggestion that we look to tribes to give us actual recommendations, which we are definitely open to, and that folks are just really supportive of having this in these meetings. So what we'd like to do is go ahead and start potentially you know, putting out a call for wellness practitioners to start gauging interest and see who we get and see what services are offered. We don't want to enter into that contract without bringing it to the council itself. So if the council's okay with us going ahead and doing that, we can bring it back to the council, or the council can task someone from the council to help work with us as well, whatever you want to do at this point. So if folks are in agreement, we'll start kind of putting out that we're looking, and these are kind of the things that we're looking for. And then once we get some hits, we can see kind of what we're dealing with. If there are recommendations on doing it a different way, we're open to doing that too, but would like to get someone under contract before we start having some of the in-person meetings.
Yeah, I would also think that we might, I mean, because it seems very regionally specific. So like, I can't really imagine someone from even Central coming to, you know, Northern California and try. It's like, it just seems so regionally specific that getting outreach is going to be the key to make sure that folks are aware that this is an opportunity. And I don't know that it would necessarily always be someone who classifies themselves as a traditional wellness practitioner, right? Like, I'm not sure that that's the only type of category that we should be under consideration, because some of the best facilitators may be like the leader of the, you know, local youth group or whatever, like people who have community support and buy-in and just know how to work within the community itself to help people open up. I can think of people in the Yurok tribe that fit that bill. They're not Yurok, but they've been there for decades, and they, just have rapport and are trusted. So I almost wonder if calling it a wellness practitioner is limiting to the types of people that might, self-select to be, serve in that role. So maybe if if the functions are highlighted, right, like what are the actual things that we're asking them to do, it might resonate more with people that are not like licensed clinicians or whatever,
Great, I love that, because I also like not putting boundaries on how people think about it on the front end. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is put out that we're seeking this kind of support for the council. We won't even really call it community wellness, though that might be part of the services that we're looking for. And then I think that you are correct. And I agree that especially as this becomes a more in-person regional thing, that we may actually want a couple of different types of people to join from each region based on regional buy-in and regional community support. Does that all sound right? I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay. Okay, if there are any other suggestions on that, it looks like no, but go ahead.
Christina, I would just like to add that I think cultural practitioners are hard to come by because it's not something that we actively promote anymore. And that comes from all of the things that we've talked about in the devastation of our people. So I would hope at some point, maybe this would lead towards some funding for programs to engage the youth that we're going to be talking to into getting into these fields, into bringing back our other ceremonies. I think that's definitely part of what we're talking about. And that's why we have limited resources to these types of medicine people and practitioners, and that whole colonial way of thinking. Even at our clinics, it's very hard to find these type of practitioners, or even in this Western medicine way, have them be recognized as something that we need. So I think this is a very deep subject, and I don't want to go back, but in listening to all this conversation, I also wanted to acknowledge that those of us whose tribes are along the Mexican border, some of us were cut in half. So as we've been talking about disenrolled or unrecognized, half of the Kumeyaay Nation is in Mexico, and families were cut off by that border, but they still are our people. So I just wanted to add that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Yeah, borders are just made up lines, but we can have that conversation another day. Okay, is there any further council member or public comment? Are there any raised hands, Justin, on the culturally informed wellness practitioner? And again, that's just was our budget line item so that, you know, we could have that, but really it's kind of open to whatever the community is most comfortable with and supports.
No hands raised.
Great, thank you. And then I will add that in the listening sessions, which we're about to talk about in the next item, we did hear about too that this could also include people who are using art as a way to kind of cope with some of this stuff and to kind of engage with the community. So that could be included as well. So for the public and community engagement and input, this is just a kind of an update item, which most of you are aware of already, but we've started in March hosting monthly listening sessions. And for the community, if you're not aware of them, they're on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday preceding these monthly meetings. Those dates are also at a new blog site. And Loretta, if you are sharper on this, you can also unmute and jump in. But in the March listening sessions, we got feedback that there should be kind of a one-stop shop for ongoing updates so that people don't have to kind of search all over the website. And that's at cthcupdates.wordpress.com. That has all of the recordings already from this week and then also from March. It also has the documents, the listening session reports, which are also at the meeting page that we uploaded. So if you do go to the tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/meetings, it's also in that line item for this meeting or the March and the April listening session reports. So if you'd like to take a look at them, they're open to the public. They're recorded, they're on the blog that we just created, where you can also follow along and subscribe so that you get the most up-to-date updates. And we're gonna transition all of our previous listening sessions and materials over to that blog as well, just so that folks don't have to continually go back and forth. So I can talk a bit more about that, or we can go on to public comment, or sorry, not the next meeting date and topics, which is similar to this one. Yes, Councilmember Porcus.
I just had a quick question. I know you brought it up in the very beginning that there was a nomination put forth for the non-federally recognized seat from Southern Cal. So at our next meeting, are we looking to have that council member join us, or do you know what the timeline is then? Okay, I was just curious.
It should be. it's also, we just have to run it by the governor, and then once he's good, then we'll go ahead and make sure that they want to join and they're still willing. But it should be by next month.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mhm. And then to clarify too on these listening sessions, really we and the community enjoys having council member engagement. So if you can join your region, we encourage it. If you can't, you can also join another region. What we're finding is that folks join when they're available. We've had them be on a regional basis because in normal times, Loretta and I will basically split it up and actually go to the different regions and host them. So that will be open to not necessarily just, you know, Hoopa, Yurok, Karuk in Northern California. It'll be whoever is living in the area and can make it. So as long as we don't have more than about 2 or 3, we're pretty good. So if you want to check in with Michael ahead of time, then, you know, we can kind of manage for that and make sure that we're not kind of inadvertently doing something we don't want to do. We've been also not really keeping to an agenda because we want it to be a bit open-ended in conversation. But if council members want to have more of an agenda because you have things that you want specific feedback on, we can also do a little bit more structure there too. Is there any further council member discussion or public comment on that item?
No hands raised.
Great. So the next item is the next meeting dates. So we've actually scoped out meeting dates for the rest of the year except for December, which track with those listening sessions. So if you all go to that tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/meetings. And that's where all of the agendas, the bylaws, and then we'll put the recordings of the listening and watch links up there as well. The next meeting is May 21st at the same time as this one. And again, the previous days will be listening sessions, also at 1. And then the next one will be June 18th. This item is actually the 2-year anniversary of the governor's apology. So we are thinking of actually building out this agenda a bit more. If there's anyone from the council or from the community who'd like to think about what that looks like. We have invited Assemblymember Ramos to join us as well and to think about how he wants to engage on that. But are thinking that maybe we do more of a full day that day to do cultural elements in the morning, and depending on whether the state is open again or not, depending on the data at that point, since June 15th is kind of the target date, it could be possible to do something not on Zoom, but with a Zoom option just so people can join. So just putting that out there, and then all the other dates are up there as well. The council, we did this on a monthly basis, or we've scoped this out on a monthly basis, so just so that everyone can have some certainty about the dates and when to join, and that we're not kind of scrambling. And we have enough council members and alternates that this should be okay for quorum purposes, but the council itself, if it decides that it's good on this initial foundation building for its work, could also then decide to cancel the rest of the future meetings and then revert to the original format that we think will start in 2022, but could start earlier if you're all ready to do so, which are the December, March, June, and September meetings that are the 2 days each. So if there's any ideas about what you'd like to talk about next meeting, apart from the carryover items from this meeting, we can talk about those. Otherwise, you can think about them and send them hopefully at least 2 weeks in advance of the next meeting. But if you're all kind of done, we can also open up to public comment.
I had a question about the future meetings that we're looking at. I wondered if attending by Zoom will remain an option even if we start to meet in person.
So it's sounding like, and this is just from, rumblings of how we're going to transition if we're in a place through we can, but it's sounding like the preference of most Bagley Keene bodies is to have more accessibility and have that as an option. That'll require some statutory changes. So I'm not sure whether that's happened yet or not, but I think that the state is looking to do more of this, just given you know, that folks can join more easily in some cases, and it's cutting on travel costs a lot too.
Yeah, I guess in terms of scheduling purposes for the council members, it would be helpful to know if we might be able to attend those meetings by Zoom as well. You know, obviously preferably it would be in person, but because of the distance, there could be issues about attending a meeting that's pretty far away.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted as that evolves, because again, it's right now, the reason you can do it is because of some waivers to existing law with like the Bagley Keene type of issues. And we'll let you know as we get more clarity on how that goes.
Okay, thank you.
Christina,
Yes.
before we go to public comment, I do want to kind of clarify my previous comments. I think I've made them in every meeting, though. I do have this concern about time and the time we have available to do our work. And there was a public comment that we received, slightly different context, but I make this remark generally because, you know, this Truth and Healing Council that has come into existence has come into existence under very unique circumstances. I think only 3 governors have ever issued an apology to tribes in their state prior to Governor Newsom doing this. It's never been done in California. And no governor in the state has, I think, even contemplated something like this, much less taking the action to do it. And the council, the formation of the council in concept and manifesting it so that we're sitting here is relatively unique. It just doesn't happen much at all across the United States. So that's the context for what we're doing. But it also has a political context. There's a political underpinning to what we're doing that, at least in my opinion. And, you know, I like to be I like to think I'm optimistic, but, you know, I also like to, sometimes it feels like, you know, we're in a batting cage and you don't know when that next pitch is going to come. If you turn your back, you got to be careful if the ball doesn't hit you in the back of the head or whatever. So, you know, I know the governor's official the term he's in ends in 2023, and we're in 2021 right now. And given all the testimony and information we need to collect and assimilate and collate and publish, I don't see us doing that in 2 years. Now, I think hopefully we all hope that the governor gets another term. We also hope that, you know, the issue that's presently in front of the governor in terms of being challenged, that gets dispensed with favorably as well. So if he gets another term, we certainly have more work to do. But I think fundamentally my concern is no governor to this point has had the outlook that Governor Newsom has had. And I don't expect a subsequent governor to think or have the outlook that Governor Newsom has had. And I'm not sure that the work of this, I'm not sure the existence of this council survives into another governor's term, a different governor's term. Governors have different priorities. You know, the robustness, relatively speaking, of an economy of this state ebbs and flows. And I think the formation of this council happens at a time when there's a relative good feeling about, or had been anyway, good feeling about where things were pre-COVID. And, you know, so I think we need to be mindful and judicious about how we apportion our time, and that it be, and so I reference our core mission as such as it is, and that we don't get bogged down in too many extraneous activities, because we have this unique window of opportunity in time with this governor, and no guarantee that a subsequent governor carries the mission of the council forward. We would make the best case for that, but I think our existence, in the end, may not outlive the political life of the current governor. It's kind of a cautionary tale, I suppose, because so many things are political. And I would hope it does, and I would hope that we could prevail on a subsequent administration, that if this work takes 10 years, that we are able to carry that forward. But it could just as well have the plug pulled on it at whatever point in time we are. So I would like us to have as much work of our work done in the time that we have with Governor Newsom to get it done. So that's why I make these remarks. I'm concerned that the plug gets pulled, hypothetically speaking, in a few years, if this takes a few years. So thank you for that opportunity.
I have a quick question about that. If the governor changes, does the next governor have to actively pull the plug on us as long as we're within our original timeline, or do we just keep going if the governor takes no action?
Executive orders are, they're alive until someone actively pulls the plug. And so most executive orders do not get rescinded unless we've seen a lot of executive orders from the previous federal administration get rescinded within this first quarter of the year, because folks are reassessing whether they're legal or whether they reflect American values. I would say that you're likely okay with this, but I do think that Councilmember Maccaro has very salient points about political will and political support for things like this. And so you've got a very good ally in the governor's seat right now who is willing to put both his name on these things, he's willing to put himself on these things, and he's willing to put budget on these things in a way that I've never seen before from any political leader, really, in America at least. Well, not tribal leaders, obviously, but so I would say that, there are very good points, and it's also good points about thinking about how to utilize this mechanism to its full potential, through things like partnerships and figuring out if this iteration of this group doesn't last because of, it's already time limited by nature of the executive order, but if it doesn't last because of political will or because of political changes, what is the next iteration of this that carries on the work in a way that's meaningful and impactful?
If I could add on to that too, one of the things that Mark's comments made me think about was just one, those partnerships, and whether they be academic or they be funding, are ways to, in a sense, buy some insurance, right? To make sure we are carried forward into the future, but also to focus more narrowly on who and what can actually be held accountable for the purpose of the council. So where are we directing our energies? And it sounds like, given some of these considerations, we should really focus, and I think we've mentioned this before, a lot on the potential reforms at the state government level. So as a matter of scoping, but timing, and then of course identifying all of the other things that are, still coming up. But in terms of recommendations, that may be the place where we focus.
Thank you, council members. Any further thoughts before we go into public comment? Okay, then moving right along, we will open up to general public comment. If you have a public comment, please raise your hand and Justin will call on you. And if you called in, I believe it was *9, Justin, but let me know if that's not correct.
Yeah, *9 to raise your hand.
My screen.
Okay, Janelle, I'm going to allow you to speak now.
Hi, thank you so much. I had a few questions. I'll just start with the first one. Is there a budget that the council has been given to work within? And if so, is it publicly accessible?
There is a budget. It is publicly accessible insofar as all state budgets are publicly accessible, and that's at the Department of Finance page. It's the e-budget if you Google it.
Okay. Okay, I will definitely be going to look at that. I also wanted to know if there were any plans for specific monies to be set aside for monuments or plaques on land that is or was Native American owned.
So as part of this initiative, we have some feedback. Okay, yeah, as part of this initiative, that hasn't been budgeted. The budgeting for this initiative has been primarily on the human resources piece of this, and the council members and the travel and the actually community gathering piece of it. However, that said, in the governor's proposed budget for January 2021, which is still in process and gets a revision next month, and then we'll go through the legislative process to get finalized. There is a substantial budget for at least the Parks Department to start doing more of that, where it's land acknowledgements in parks space, but then also more interpretive signage that is more clear about whose land you're on.
That's really good to know. And then I also recall that there was talk about a subcommittee specifically of college age people. I think the ideal age that was talked about was 18. Are there any plans for other subcommittees that would involve the public or could involve the public to be organized?
I think that this council is open to ideas about what those might be. So if you have ideas, they would love to hear that. I also want to mention too that that's kind of an open thing for all of the public. If you have things that you'd like to bring to the council, or you already have existing groups that you'd like to work with the council on, that's open as well.
Thank you so much. I'm finished speaking.
Okay, Donna, I'm going to allow you to speak now. Donna, you should be able to speak now. You may need to unmute your phone.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, I definitely agree with the Chairman Macaro's statement and idea about and concern about transition within state government. I think I have over 27 years in state government and working with different administrations and former governor appointee to Department of the Disability Advisory. And so I'm looking at perhaps the work that you're doing, what would really, and I'm hoping that it maybe even exists, but some kind of document, research, handbook on California Native Americans, the history, the genocide, all of that's so important. And being able to put that together in a meaningful way for incoming administration, executives, the cabinet level, the Senate, the assembly members, State Department appointees, and trickling down into department operations. And I just want to say kudos to the development of the California Native American Digital Atlas, the Digital Atlas pointing out the horrific history and trauma that we've endured and gone through in regards to genocide. And I know with our water board, we have about 24 tribal liaisons that work in our department, and they were given a walkthrough by Jason, I think McCannell was his name. He was the developer, helped build that digital atlas. And it was so wonderful to hear from staff how they did not know about that history and how wonderful it was to just have the opportunity to learn about the real history and hopefully gain more insight and be more sensitive to the past. And so I just want to kind of comment about that some ways there, and you're right about that. Executive orders are pretty much there until somebody decides to pull the plug. So this particular effort that we're doing could possibly be something that we drive legislation for so that it stays intact. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And then one thing I did want to point out is that we are in the process of developing training modules for state employees. So we have a contract with ASU Law to work on that. Our lead just got poached by Deb Holland to be her chief of staff. So we're working on some other folks now, or working with some other folks now, but we are just for this, for the council and for folks listening, there will be some outreach to some of the tribal leaders in California to work on that as well, because it's supposed to be very tribal oriented, and we'll discuss Sovereignty 101, modern engagement, the history of California specifically, and then some California specific laws like ICWA and the like.
Okay, Janelle has her hand raised. I'm going to allow her to speak. I'm not sure what happened. She dropped.
Hi. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, my name is actually not Janelle, but I happen to be Janelle's cousin. My name is Sarah Perez. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to speak with us and to hear us and to be present. It means a lot. I just would want, I'd like to piggyback on the importance of the tribes that have not been federally recognized, not making and that we make that a really top priority, because I think with that federal recognition, there's so much healing that's going to take place just with that alone. You know, with the 18 lost treaties, with the mass genocide.
I'm not sure what happened, but we lost connection there.
Yeah, looks like the call was dropped.
Okay. I'm going to move on to Susanna. Susanna, you should be able to speak now. You just need to unmute your phone.
Great, thank you. My name is Susanna Sandoval, and I currently serve as a Human Rights Commissioner for the United Nations Permanent Forum for Indigenous Peoples. And we're currently in week one of our UN session virtually here naturally held in New York. But I have been in and out of California for the last couple of years, and in contact with some of the tribal nation elders, including around the LA River, et cetera. And so I just wanted to just remind you that there are other resources, you know, at the UN level that could be helpful with the work that you're doing. And it's groundbreaking work, by the way, in California to have a statewide council. And so if there's other resources that are needed, you can definitely contact me. And then I also sent over an email to some of the representatives that have been sharing some of the work during our UN session and some of the other tribal elders, because there still seems to be a level of disconnect, like people have been saying, between the non-federally recognized folks and the federally recognized indigenous nations. And also, you know, once you can build out what the program looks like, you could see regionally what could be done as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Janelle, I'm going to allow you to speak. Looks like you just lowered your hand. Okay, there's no hands, Janelle. Okay, I'll allow you to speak.
you so much. If I could get Susanna's information, her email or phone number or contact information, I would really appreciate that. Additionally, I am not able to easily find where the council's budget is. If that link could also be dropped into the chat, I would really appreciate it.
Okay. Janelle, is your hand still raised, or hang on, let me allow you. Okay, gotcha. No hands are raised.
Great.
I'm sorry, Susanna raised her hand.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll actually ask the question. What is the current budget for the council?
Right now, it's 100,000 a year. And that's all I can say at this point.
Is that right? Is that, can you break that down at least? How much is dedicated to programming versus the overhead costs for staffing?
None of it goes to staffing. It's all for the council itself. So I don't have it in front of me, but I can, if folks give me a minute, go through what it does go to. Okay. It's dedicated primarily to travel for council members, culturally appropriate wellness services and travel, live stream, consultation transcripts, court reporting, and streaming services. And so this is the shoestring budget that was scaled back from an initial $450,000 budget, which did include contracts for a researcher and a report writer and some documentary services.
Great, thank you for that.
Okay, one more hand raised. Robert Levi, I'm going to allow you to speak.
I thought we would miss you, Robert.
Oh no, I told you I'd be here. And it's like we've had 5 days of each other. I don't know if that's good or bad. Anyway, Miom, everybody. I've been with Christina for 5 days now, and I don't know who's fed up with whom. But anyway, really,
I can tell you that. I can answer that.
Okay, Mark. Okay. Anyway, just quick in terms of the education, let some council members know that right now we have AB 1554 going through, which emphasizes more California Indian history in the history social science curriculum, and that's just getting it going. Also, and all this is the healing part, and again, it's just us California Indian teachers or just Indian teachers in general, trying to get the ball rolling to get the pre-K through 12 grades more acclimated to American Indian history. Ethnic studies is also now a graduation requirement by the year 2024. So all public high school students will be versed in the 4 basic ethnic groups, and currently trying to get more California Indian curriculum in that component coming up. Also, San Diego State today just had their first Indigenous Research Symposium, and that was pretty good in terms of bringing across the Southern California Kumeyaay point of view. And then also tomorrow, the Tataviam are giving a presentation on curriculum at Cal State Northridge. So again, in terms of education, again, to let you guys know, this healing process, we're trying to get that going. And again, especially like I've been saying for the whole week, is that the kids. And I mentioned the the report, now I just can't remember what it was, but about dropouts in the state of California, that it's mostly junior high and middle school Indian students that are dropping out and really committing suicide at this point. So again, that's why another reason why we're addressing this issue about getting Indian history into the curriculum. So just FYI for you guys, and keep up the good work, especially you, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, one hand raised, Janelle. I'll allow you to speak.
I was just wanting to say that it might be helpful to leave the chat option on, because it makes it difficult for participants to share information about topics that are being covered. And I did still want to request Susanna's information if she's willing to give it, if that is something that the council has. Thank you.
No other hands raised.
Okay, then if there's no further public comment, we will.
One hand raised.
Oh.
Susanna, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Great. I have no issue having my information shared with the entire council and the public that's actually listening. My question is in regards to how pandemic relief is being handled in California, and if any of the federal to state funding is trickling down into this council at all for any of the activities.
I don't believe any of the COVID relief funding is trickling to this council, but it's something that, well, you have to justify it being part of it, but it could potentially be, I think, if we thought about it in terms of the live streaming services, but I'd have to take a look at it and work with our Department of Finance on that.
And I would actually encourage the council to ask for pandemic relief funding, because a lot of the work that is necessary, as our elders keep reminding us, is that Indigenous peoples have been taking care of ourselves for a long time. And so as experts in our own care, outside of earmarking things for vaccinations, there are other ways that the communities that funding should be requested for, and this council would know best as representatives of some of those nations. So I would definitely super encourage you, because I'm involved in some of the conversations in DC, and they won't give if you won't ask.
Thank you. And I know some of the council members are chairpersons of their tribes, and I know that they're working in their own capacities to get those funds to their communities as well.
Donna, I see your hands raised. I'll allow you to speak.
All right, well, it's been a long Friday and I appreciate you guys, all the work you guys are doing. I just want to share like two things with you. I'm a volunteer. I work with the California GIS Council. We're made up of pretty much volunteers with the state, federal, the tribes now involved, and then academic folks. And I'm in, I guess I'm on the executive team for the Cal GIS Council. And I'm also heading up the tribal work group. So we basically have developed our charter. It's in draft form. If anybody's interested in participating with this, our focus is mainly to help the knowledge build of GIS within California tribal circles. And we also want to encourage all our different entities that we work with to be inclusive of tribal mapping information. so that we get put in for consideration for housing or roads or education opportunities, health, those kinds of issues. And I know that the California Native American Heritage Commission certainly has been playing a significant role when it comes to like the digital atlas that was developed, but also they also provided some input on the direction that we were heading in. And we kind of overlap, but we're kind of a faster paced organization because we're not kind of embedded in government. So we can get some things pushed through. We're not a lobbying group. We're not anything like that. We're just a group that kind of provides just the best of both worlds in the sense of GIS and helping different communities with that. So if anybody's interested, please feel free to reach me. My email is really easy. It's just Donna Begay, all one word, DONNA BEGAY, and it's at yahoo.com. So feel free to reach out to me or Google California GIS Council Tribal Work Group and you'll find it. And we just meet like 4 times a year for the group, but we also have presenters and we're having, I think, some people from the company, ESRI, GIS ARC software folks joining us. And then we have a couple of anthropologists and archaeologists that want to talk about some mapping solutions that they have in working with tribes. So a variety of different topics that we run into. And to me, I've used GIS to help protect our cultural landscapes in Lake Isabella area with the Corps of Engineers. I've also used it to help with the NAGPRA involvement and working with Tule River to obtain some of our human remains from UC Berkeley and the Smithsonian. So it's important, I think, that we understand how to use this technology, but also how it can help. And we also are using it now to kind of map out a very culturally sensitive resource map for our tribe in regards to areas where we collect our native foods, native plants, and some of our traditional cultural sites. And I just want to say one more thing in regards to the prior speaker mentioned something about, how we can get involved with the COVID, the virus funding. One of the things that we're all missing throughout California tribal lands and communities is that our ceremonies, we aren't able to come together. So our wellnesses are impacted by that. And I think that the ability for us to be able to share this type of information, the cost for having Zoom meetings and team meetings, and these things cost money and not everybody has the means to do this. So I do appreciate what this council is doing. Thank you very much.
Can I respond to that, Christina? I just, you know what, I was encouraged to hear you say to mention the GIS, the Cal GIS group that you participate in, Donna, because I think this is one of the arenas. I just want to say that one of the problems I think that we encounter as Indian people, as tribes, is invisibility. And I mean, there's several, but so much flows from not being visible to the public, to the state, to the world. And one of those places where I think we disappear is in mapping. Mapping so often gets left to the hands of people who just have no clue that, there were tribal landmarks or resources or villages, you name it, that there is a tribal landscape underneath whatever they think is there. And so as they go about their business, mundane business, relatively speaking, of putting labels on things, we disappear as they make our names disappear over time, and place names and things like that. So I just want to thank you for being a participant in that. My tribe has a GIS department, so I'm a little acutely aware of the implications of when mapping goes wrong, what can happen. So I want to encourage that. Thank you, and perhaps see a partnership opportunity with our council here down the road. So anyway, more on that later, but just wanted to give you say some. I appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for it.
Can I
Okay,
say something
no
as
other
well?
hands raised?
Justin, do you mind if I say something else as well? I think, thank you, Donna, also for those comments. I automatically, I started thinking about the mapping of the 18 unratified treaties and identifying the land in California that, you know, was not passed to the tribes. And in addition to the recognition issue, it also brings that up and helping us understand who are in fact the direct inheritors, and what does that look like in terms of real estate holdings over time, and as you know, potentially a way to think through, you know, recommendations around how we can move forward for land policy. So, thank you for your comments.
I will also make a quick plug that I encourage all the council members to take a look at the digital atlas that's at the Native American Heritage Commission website, because it also shows bounty lands, which are very much also a part of what this group could be thinking about.
Donna raised her hand again. I'm going to allow her to speak.
Yes, I just wanted to comment with Chairman Maccaro. I remember back in the 90s going to Pechanga and talking with Jill Sherman, and we were just beginning to talk about creating a GPS crew for your tribe. And I worked for the CCC, the California Conservation Corps at the time. And we went to your reservation to map out and show your tribal members, some of them, how to utilize a GPS system and mark out all your emergency response resources, such as the fire hydrants and where your fire department was at the time. Very fun project, and we actually got paid to do that work. The Corps members learned a lot. They were non-tribal, but they learned a lot about Pechanga, that's for sure. But I do want to say that with GIS, absolutely, my own department, State Water Resource Control Board, when I joined them back in 2013, I think by 2014, I had the Pacific regions GIS mapping data mapped with our water board regions. And it was the first time that we linked that data together. So water rights is also important in water quality and safe drinking water. So I can't say enough how that map still exists, and our department uses it a lot. So just a good point, Chairman Maccaro. If we're not on the map, then we don't exist in some of these decision-making areas for federal, state, and local governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other raised hands, Justin?
No hands raised.
Okie doke. Then we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. For the next meeting, one thing I forgot that I wanted to mention is we're going to put a line for reports from the commissioners and the subcommittees, because it would have been really wonderful to hear from council members, from the council members and subcommittees, because of it would have been great to hear from Councilmember Kessler Mata about your side event at the permanent forum. So we will put that on the agenda for next meeting. But with that, if there are any words of farewell from council members, please feel free to say them now. Otherwise, okay, it looks like we're good. Thank you all for your time. Looks like Councilmember Maccaro's dog is needing some attention. And
they've been ignored for 3 hours. See, they're ready to go out.
Great. Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you to the public for your time, and we will see you next month.
Thank you,
Thanks, Christina.
Thanks a lot. See you guys.